Hey everyone, welcome to our presentation. Today we will be discussing ADHD in middle school students and helping you teachers understand the mechanisms behind ADHD and how to facilitate a constructive learning environment. So first, a basic overview. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is commonly known as ADHD, and it is one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders that affects children and adolescents. So, what exactly is a neurodevelopmental disorder? It's a condition that occurs um, due to the brain not being able to fully develop neurotypically at birth. This is not something that children can grow out of, develop, or can be cured some point in their lives, which is a common misconception that is known in society.
The exact causes and neurobiological factors contributing to ADHD are still broadly unknown, but research into working memory appears the most conclusive. This is memory that lasts seconds to hours and can include manipulating and changing ideas. Children with ADHD show deficits in visuospatial and phonological, that is, sound and speech, memory, when compared to children of the same age. To provide some insight from an anatomical perspective, there are a few brain regions that present differently in children with ADHD. Firstly, the prefrontal cortex. This is important for maintaining attention to a task. It works by inhibiting other systems while we are trying to focus on something. The prefrontal cortex matures more slowly in children with ADHD, which makes it more difficult to ignore distractions. Second, the cerebellum. This is important for the regulation of movement and has been shown to have a reduced volume in children with ADHD. This could possibly lead to difficulty with controlling or inhibiting movements, called motor response inhibition. Thirdly, the default mode network is a brain system that is active when an individual is not doing anything. In children with ADHD, this network is believed to have a heightened degree of connectivity to active neural networks, such as the task performing network. This leads to higher stimulation in functional areas of the brain when the child is doing nothing. From a neurochemical perspective, the primary difference in an ADHD brain is an overall decrease in the concentration of the neurotransmitter dopamine. This neurotransmitter is especially important in learning because it regulates motivation. Dopamine connects the pleasure center of the brain to the hippocampus, which means that when we do something that gives us pleasure, we remember it and we want to do it again. In typical children, dopamine is released before the reward arrives, called anticipatory firing. However, in children with ADHD, the anticipatory dopamine cue is weak or non-existent, called a dopamine transfer deficit. This is especially true for reward schedules that are discontinuous or delayed, both of which we are highly likely to see in the classroom. This basically means that a child with ADHD shouldn't be expected to thrive under the same reinforcement learning mechanisms as their peers.
And now let's talk a little bit about the symptoms and subtypes of ADHD. So the symptoms of ADHD can be broken down into three categories. We have inattention, which is characterized by distractibility, such as difficulty sustaining attention, difficulty listening to others, forgetfulness. We have impulsivity, which often relates to control issues, such as interrupting others, difficulty waiting their turn, and risk-taking behaviors. And then we have hyperactivity, which can include fidgeting, seeming as if they're in constant motion, squirming, and having difficulty engaging. And now if we look back at this chart, we might be able to gain a better understanding of how the combination of these three different types of symptoms can contribute to the three different presentations of ADHD. Another thing to note about these three subtypes is that hyperactive impulsive is the least common form out of the three, and combined is the most common. Now let's talk about the relationship between sex and ADHD. So according to the CDC, boys are 13% more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than girls. And this isn't to say that ADHD is more common among boys. This is likely due to biases in the diagnostic process of ADHD, because we have seen that boys are 2 to 3 times more likely to have hyperactive or combined ADHD compared to girls. The symptoms of this type of ADHD are more external or quote-unquote typical ADHD symptoms as people come to think of them. And so because of that, boys often present more noticeable and disruptive behaviors that then warrant a diagnosis. But it is true of all individuals that if one presents external ADHD symptoms, they are more likely to receive a diagnosis. We've also seen that girls are more likely to be diagnosed later in life compared to boys. And this could be due to hormonal differences, as when women go through puberty, it can change the presentation of ADHD symptoms. And this noticeable shift is what warrants a diagnosis. And it is theorized that the hormonal differences between males and females are responsible for the relationship between ADHD presentation and gender. But the connection between ADHD and gender is still largely misunderstood.
Okay, so let's go over some teaching tips. What can you do to help? So while medication is an option that has a really high percentage of success, it's totally valid for a parent to be reluctant to exposing their child to this medication at a young age due to symptoms and things that might occur once the child starts taking medication. So let's go over some strategies and tips and tricks you can use in the classroom to help improve classroom attentiveness. So one thing you can do is to set them up with the tools they need to succeed. So this can mean multiple things. For example, a planner to write down their tasks for the day to help them remember, teaching note-taking strategies that are personalized to their interests. For example, I have ADHD, and something that really helped me to learn was color coding my planner or writing or having a specific bullet point template that I use for each class, or color coding classes to know which work I have to do for each class. Fidget toys to touch and interact with, allowing them to move without distracting themselves or others in the classroom. Next, you can provide opportunities for breaks in movement. It's hard for a student with ADHD to sit in the seat for the entire class and maintain their focus. So getting out of their seat, stretching, going to get a drink of water, or even small amounts of movement can release pent-up energy, and this will improve oxygen flow to the brain, overall resulting in a better learning environment. Creating a routine can also help a lot. So a schedule where a student knows what to expect will be easier for them to follow. Knowing what was going on throughout the day will help them keep their mind focused on the present and be mindful instead of wondering what's going on next, what are we doing next in class? Minimizing distractions. Students who struggle from ADHD are hypersensitive to distractions, leading to overstimulation at times, especially in stressful situations such as exam taking. So providing a distraction-free environment can enhance learning. So what does this mean? A separate room for test taking, for example, with not as many people inside, a clutter-free desk and workspace so that they have more space to move around and they're not focused on multiple things on their desk, or even working at the front of the classroom so they can't see what their peers are doing behind them, which can lead to potential distractions. We have more of these tips and strategies in the handout that we will provide, and it'll go more into detail about what you need to know.